Today's guest is going to talk about menopause diet for weight loss, natural supplements for perimenopause, and generally how to lead a healthy lifestyle. Charlotte Hunter, best known as the Menopause Nutritionist, is an expert in nutritional therapy, specialising in helping women to feel their healthiest from perimenopause through menopause and beyond using food, lifestyle, and therapeutic methodologies for feeling good. We're in complete agreement when we say that as women, we shouldn't have to survive menopause, but thrive and enjoy life to its fullest, all without compromising. Charlotte joins me to discuss hot flushes, brain fog, diet and hormones, and how to understand these. Her approach uses food, supplements, and lifestyle choices to form a menopause master strategy. A guest on many podcasts, Charlotte has come on quite a journey through motherhood and having also undergone a full hysterectomy. We can't wait to get stuck in and hear her story. Welcome, Charlotte, to Unpause the Menopause. Thanks so much for joining us today. How are you?
Hi, Morven. Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Have you seen your sort of top 3 myths that you've seen about menopause? Perhaps, I would imagine, on social media rather than on TV and radio, that we can debunk straight off today.
I think this idea that HRT is a magic wand, it really isn't. It really isn't. I mean, I take buckets of HRT. I love my HRT. I'm an advocate for HRT. And if anyone tried to take it off me, I would literally wrestle them to the ground. However, I think there's this misconception that if you're dealing with all of these symptoms associated with menopause, that taking HRT will just fix all of that. I think in most cases it helps massively and is life-changing and all of those things. But very often the problems that you had even before menopause are still going to be there during and after menopause, even if you take HRT. So if you're stressed, if you struggle with your weight, if perhaps you've got some mental health issues or concerns or huge levels of just general stress or sleep problems, all of those things, yes, if they become worse because of the menopause, they're not necessarily going to disappear. You've still got to address those issues.
I completely agree with you. I think we always say that there's no single silver bullet, is the phrase I keep using, to menopause. Now, looking specifically at nutrition and our needs as we enter perimenopause, do our needs change with regards to nutrition?
Yeah, I mean, massively. There's a huge metabolic shift that occurs as we move through perimenopause, through menopause itself, and then when we fully class as postmenopausal as well. We don't pay enough attention to our cardiovascular system, I don't think. We're so focused on HRT, the hormones, and plug in those symptoms. We're not thinking about the wider implications of our health as a woman moving through menopause. During that time, one of the big changes is that we become naturally more insulin resistant. So we're not as sensitive to those signals from our insulin. And insulin is like the key, isn't it? It allows us to access the carbohydrates from our diet and tells us to either use it as energy, put it into storage, and that whole system can go a bit haywire as we go through menopause.
Just tips for people on how to perhaps deal with insulin resistance as it's worsening through perimenopause.
I think one of the biggest myths is such a thing as a menopause diet. I mean, we're all so different, but I think there are certain themes that we've got to stick with to support our health. Firstly, cutting out the sugars, especially the added sugars. It's really unpopular, and I get slammed on social media for saying this, but get your carbohydrates down. Just keep them controlled. If you're having, say, one of your favorite meals is spaghetti bolognese, well, great. Doesn't mean you can't have your spaghetti bolognese, but perhaps think about having half of your plate with the meat, the vegetables, the sauce. Have a couple of spoonfuls of spaghetti or rice. Just like less than even quarter of your plate, so you're still having your carbs, and then have a gorgeous big salad and loads of olive oil and make it a much more balanced meal. I think even if you do absolutely nothing and you make no changes to your diet, if you can get to 3 meals a day, limit snacking, limit caffeine between meals, you will start to notice differences in your metabolism.
Looking perhaps specifically at some of the symptoms that some of our listeners might have. So if we, I hate, because there's so many symptoms of perimenopause, but if we look at some of the more common ones, perhaps of hot flushes, brain fogs, and sleep, are there any foods in particular that I know, and I know it's hard to generalize, I completely understand that, but are there any foods that you might recommend or supplements that you might recommend for our listeners to take if they've got those three perhaps most mainstream symptoms of perimenopause and menopause?
I think the formulas or the supplements that really make a difference are those supplements that target the main pillars of our health. And I think when it comes to menopause and hormones in general, whether you're in your 30s or you're in your 60s, beyond, it doesn't matter. There are the fundamentals that we need to address. So we need to be thinking about stress. So there are certain nutrients that will support stress and sleep. Thinking about inflammation. So we know that things like turmeric would be lovely. Thinking, omegas. We want to be thinking about our insulin. And then also the gut. You can't forget about the gut. So, good probiotics for some people. Thinking about the immune system in the gut as well. So I think really the kind of complexes that address those fundamentals are going to be much, much more effective. And a less is more approach will also be more effective than looking at these supplements that have got literally, a massive long list of every possible ingredient you would possibly want to add to a menopause supplement.
You've talked about supplements, which obviously I have an interest in, and I couldn't agree more. I think there are those 4 pillars, and if those are addressed, and people then they're all interlinked as well. That's the incredible thing about the way that they operate. But if you're looking perhaps at easy fixes for people and foodstuffs that they can pick up in their local supermarket, is there anything in particular? And obviously we can't maybe take it every day, but throughout the week, what should you be including in your diet that may help?
So I would say with food, just get as many vegetables as you possibly can. And I don't think anyone I see eats enough vegetables. I mean, the idea of 5 a day, we need to have at least double that. But I think a lot of us even struggle to get our 5 a day. So the biggest advice I can give you would be to increase vegetables, because it's going to increase your fiber, which is good for your gut. It's good for your hormone metabolism. So if you're an HRT, you need to really love your gut. So, if you're eating vegetables, think about ways to increase it. So in the morning, you might think, oh, I'm not going to eat vegetables at breakfast. That's just weird. That's what a lot of people will say to me. But if you're having eggs, or you're having, some bacon, perhaps have some avocado, have a handful of spinach. Whatever you're having for breakfast, maybe make a small smoothie to go with it. I mean, we don't want to be going mad on smoothies because of the sugar, but you could put half a banana, tablespoon of berries, and then whatever you can find in your fridge. And if if this taste is too strong, add some lemon juice, add some cinnamon, because that will start to hide that really, really strong flavor. Or ginger is a good one as well. So think about how you can add your vegetables. At lunchtime, have an extra handful of salad, chop up some tomatoes. And every meal, just have a side order of vegetables as a way to try and boost your levels. I think the other thing, nutritionally speaking, would be to make sure you're eating protein at every meal. So every meal, just ask yourself, where is my protein? So breakfast, where's your protein? Lunch, dinner. And even if you're having a snack, snacks aren't great, but if we've got a really long day, sometimes you need an afternoon snack. But think of it as a mini meal and think, where's my protein? Don't just have an apple, have some nuts with it. Don't just grab some carrot sticks. Make sure you have some hummus or a little bit of nut butter or some cold meat out of the fridge. But just to make sure you've got that that protein. The other thing as well is water. Make sure you're hydrated. You know, if you're having hot flushes, if you're having problems with your digestion, if you're not sleeping, if you're having night sweats, if you've got brain fog, staying hydrated is going to really help. So vegetables, protein, good hydration. What I personally do is I like having broth in the morning. So a chicken veg broth or a beef and veg broth. Honestly, it's just the best thing for me because honestly, I wake up in the morning and just think, oh, I've got breakfast. You know, I know I'm a nutritionist and I'm not supposed to admit this, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm just not ready to eat. And it goes back to what we said right at the beginning of listen to your body and not putting yourself under pressure. Before I went through menopause, I was like some hungry mad thing in the morning. I'd be like, oh, where's breakfast? And I'd just be like raiding the fridge and the cupboard. I was absolutely starving. But I think since I've gone through menopause, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I'm just not hungry. You know, I just need to give myself a bit of time. So very often I'll make myself a herbal tea, and I'll just won't worry. I'll take the kids on the school run, then I'll come back and I'll have a humongous bowl of chicken broth, and I feel so much better for it. And then because the broth is full of protein, vegetables, I'll have all my supplements with it. I have my oils and my bits and bobs that I take, and I'm set for the day. And I really don't feel hungry until lunchtime.
I really want to talk to you about surgical menopause as well, because I think that's something that we need to talk about much more. And would you mind sharing about how it felt?
When we realised that my poor cervix was just falling apart, I was booked in for my hysterectomy. I only had it about a month after being advised to go ahead with it. So I didn't really have much time to understand what was going to happen. I thought, oh, I just got to get feeling better. So I spoke to friends. And the best thing you can do, I think, anyone who's going through a surgical menopause is talk to people who've had the same. Don't listen to what they say about all the bad stuff. Just ask them really direct questions. So I came out the other side, and I had a laparoscopic hysterectomy, so I didn't have an incision. They just somehow managed to put it all out those tiny 3 little holes. And I had a catheter, and I just woke up thinking, I don't actually feel too bad. I mean, I was really, really bloated. I think that's the worst thing. And actually, everyone else I've spoken to said the same. It's the gas, because they fill you up with air, so they can do everything they need to. And you get a lot of trapped wind. You feel it across your shoulders and your shoulder blades, around your back. And that was more uncomfortable than anything else. I don't remember the incisions being painful. I felt like I was going through, I suppose, a really heavy, painful period. They packed me home with a great big bag of painkillers, which I merrily accepted. And in terms of the surgery, it was all right, but within about 48 hours, I was in hospital 2 nights. So 48 hours of being home, oh my God, that hot flushes hit me like a train. And I was really surprised it happened so quickly. I don't think I was ready for that, to notice those changes straight away. And for a week, because I wasn't due to see my doctor again for a week, just to discuss how to change my HRT. She just gave me a really, really low dose to get started. And I spent a week just in a vest and a pair of pants and a dressing gown. And people came round, and I would say, okay, just to warn you, I'm in my dressing gown. I'm likely to strip off at any moment without warning, just to let you know. So that was the worst thing. But since then, I mean, I've gone on HRT. It does its job most of the time. I do get the odd hot flush when I'm stressed. I do suffer with insomnia and joint pains if I don't drink enough water, if I don't sleep well enough. And it's going back to those pillars. If you don't support your pillars, then menopause is going to be crappy, even if you're on HRT, which is why diet, lifestyle support, and really good quality targeted supplements are the way to get through it.
There's one thing I want to touch on you about as well that we've not talked about is iron and ferritin levels, because those fluctuate a lot in perimenopause and menopause too. Have you got any tips on how to deal with that? Because iron, as probably a lot of our listeners know, causes a lack of iron causes extreme fatigue in some circumstances.
I do quite a lot of functional testing in my practice. I always check iron levels. I mean, it's a complete no-brainer. There's especially during perimenopause, because we know during that time our estrogen levels can peak. We get these surges, power surges of estrogen. 1 minute they're kind of up here, next minute they're down here, and of course that can influence our cycle. And if women are still having periods, they can go from being very, very light to the heaviest they've ever had in their lives. So yeah, you've got to keep an eye on your iron. And if you're using iron supplements, you should also continue to measure and monitor your iron to make sure that your levels aren't too high. I think in most people, most of the time, it's quite difficult to get really, really high iron levels because most of us just don't eat enough iron in our diets, especially if we're avoiding red meat, perhaps health reasons, ethical reasons, or the price of it.
So if you are perhaps not eating as much red meat, what else would you recommend to get where you would get iron from in your diet?
So I do think it's quite difficult. You will find amounts in any animal food. You'll get some iron. Vegetarian sources, some beans, pulses, certain dry fruits, but it's really difficult. And I think you should be taking a supplement that contains iron.
We talked a lot about nutrition, which obviously is why you're here today, but have you got any other lifestyle choices that you'd make, just to round up maybe other tips that you would give our listeners on what other small changes they could make?
Do your best to get good quality sleep. It goes alongside the things that I mentioned, like inflammation, stress, insulin. Think about your sleep. What can you do to try and get better sleep? Different things will work for everyone. Epsom salt baths with some essential oils can be great. Find your routine. I read a study somewhere that said wearing socks at bedtime can help you sleep better. Find the right temperature, and I think as well, don't feel pressured by what you should do to get a night's sleep. Find out what works for you. I sleep better when I'm warmer, although all the research said we should be sleeping in a colder room. I do wear fluffy socks at night time, helps me sleep. Think about your pillows, think about the room. What are you wearing? What do you eat before you go to bed? For some people, if they're not sleeping well and they're waking in the night because their blood sugar's crashing, you might need to have a little snack before you go to bed. I know that completely goes against some of the diets that recommend intermittent fasting, time restricted eating. But when you're going through menopause, your body is in a state of flux. It's often under a lot more pressure and you're under stress. If you need a small snack to help you sleep through the night, that's got, why not do that? But think about a balanced whole grain carbohydrate, like some oat cakes with a bit of nut butter would be fine. A little bit of banana and some nut butter, but find out what works for you and don't feel like the sleep police are telling you to do one thing and then you just make yourself more stressed by trying to do all of those things. Pick a few things, but really, really work on good sleep.
It's been absolutely fascinating today, Charlotte. I've really loved chatting to you. And I think you've got so many great tips. And thank you so much also for sharing your story about surgical menopause, which I think it's really kind of you to share it, and just hopefully will help other people on their journey if they're going through something similar. So thanks so much.
It's been great talking to you. Thank you.
A special announcement from Salora, our show sponsor. Salora is a natural monthly supplement to support your mind and body in perimenopause and beyond. As a thank you for listening to our show, claim 50% off your first month using promo code UNPAUSE50 at Zalora.com.